Michelle Colopy, the Executive Director of Lead for Pollinators. And as always, we have to thank our sponsors. So thank you everyone for participating in this Creating Pollinator Habitat webinar series. Our webinars are supported by the following sponsors: Hispanic Marketing and Public Relations. You visit HispanicMPR.com for interviews, presentations, and more. Beauty Beyond Belief Seeds specializes in wildflower seeds, heirloom vegetable seeds, grass seeds, regional wildflower seeds, and special use wildflower mixes, including their line of 4 great pollinator mixes. Shop for your garden and pollinator habitat at bbbseed.com. 2 Million Blossoms magazine will awaken readers to the vast diversity of pollinating insects and animals. This quarterly magazine will delight, entertain, and name those well-adapted creatures buzzing through our world, because the more we know about pollinators, the better we can provide habitat. This quarterly magazine explores how bees, birds, bats, butterflies all enhance our planet. Subscribe today using the discount code word LEAD and receive $5 off the subscription rate for 1 year. Visit 2millionblossoms.com. OPN Seed has partnered with Lead for Pollinators with pollinator mixes created for beekeepers and anyone who wants to attract and support pollinators. You can get native seeds for eastern U.S. planting zones at OPN Seed. Go to the Lead for Pollinators website and select the Donor Affiliations page to order your pollinator habitat seeds. Select Support Our Cause to view featured seed selections, and a portion of sales generated from our website will help support our work. Live webinar presentations are recorded and can be viewed through our partner at Dove Audio Visual. Webinars will be posted 48 hours after the scheduled presentation date for pay-per-view. Missed a webinar? You can view these topics through our pay-per-view access. Visit our website for the recorded Login to Learn webinars and select a presentation. Our next presentation, of course, will be April 7th in the Creating Pollinator Habitat webinar series, and we will be talking about noxious weed ordinances, which actually will include one of the events that happened during my habitat. So make sure to tune in April 7th for the noxious weed ordinance presentation. But our topic today is about transforming a grassy yard into pollinator habitat. It's the 5th in our series, and it is going to present the real-world experience of me transforming my urban city lot into pollinator habitat. You will learn the how-to, the adjustments, seasonal changes, the gas line installation halfway through the growth, and more across 8 years of my urban pollinator habitat. So I am Michelle Colopy, the Executive Director of Lead for Pollinators, and let's transform a yard into habitat. Now, I want to give you a little background information because you might have to convince a spouse who's in love with their grassy yard. You might have to help convince and educate your neighbors, citizens in your neighborhood, as well as possibly policymakers. So you want to have facts behind you besides just, I want to plant flowers. Certainly for those folks who are gardening, if you have neighbors that have a garden, your pollinator habitat will help increase their crop yield, even in their little backyard garden, because it will support those native pollinators for those native plants. We all have to remember honeybees are immigrants. They came here with the Pilgrims. The Native Americans referred to them as the white man's flies. So our native pollinators evolved with the native plants. And without our native pollinators, we will lose many of the native plants. But those native pollinators increase the crop yield of especially a backyard garden of the many things we all like to grow in our gardens. The value certainly of pollinator habitat, again, pollination is giving us 1 in 3 bites of food, that native pollinators are integrally tied to native plants, and that certainly many of our pollinators are predators of mosquitoes and other pests. So we have to provide habitat for those pollinators so they can protect us from mosquitoes and other pest insects, including other pest insects that might attack a community garden or your neighbor's garden. When we use pesticides, we are decimating pollinator populations, because if you're trying to kill a soft, squishy pest, you will kill honeybees. Pesticides do not recognize, oh, I'm just supposed to kill mosquitoes. No, the pesticide, it's a chemical, it does not know that. It's a neurotoxin usually, or it starves the to death, or it exposes it to the cold, that die from exposure. So it's soft and squishy. Honeybees, native pollinators, bumblebees, they're all soft and squishy. So if we're trying to use a pesticide to kill a soft and squishy pest, you will kill pollinators. And when we look at this map for the monarch butterfly migration, we are all along the migration route. So as we plant pollinator habitat, we are helping the monarchs survive, because when they travel from Mexico, they travel across North America, headed to Canada, and it's at least 4 to 6 generations of butterflies, because one butterfly from Mexico doesn't fly all the way to Canada. They do have a short lifespan. They lay eggs along the way, and each generation goes where it's supposed to, and then they come back, laying eggs, leaving a generation, which then heads back to Mexico. As you can see from this map, we are all along the monarch's annual migration route. When we talk about native plants, especially, you can see that our native plants reduce soil erosion, because look at the root systems on those native plants. That you can see, I believe, yep, that little, the red circle, that little tiny little, it's like 2 inches deep of roots. That's grass. That is your basic Kentucky blue grass. Now, compared to native plants, look at how those native plants can survive droughts, because those root systems are so deep and they are so broad. They are making that soil a sponge to hold on to water. They are helping to break up that soil. So the plants survive droughts. They hold on to the water in that soil, so you don't need to water your habitat. This is how our native plants survive. Grass takes way too much time and money and wastes water, and you can see why. That root system, I think there are beards that are longer than that root system on Kentucky bluegrass. So certainly, again, in educating your neighbors, family members, I've had spouses come up to me, and it is the wife that wants to plant habitat, and the husband's just in love with his grassy yard. So you often have to convince other people in your family, and especially your relatives, neighbors, the value of pollinator habitat. Because as we reduce the more than 90 million acres of grass lawns, we could feed pollinators. We could reduce carbon emissions. We could help the monarch survive, and we would have cleaner water, because our lawns would actually hold on to water. You can see from that root structure on grass, it's not holding on to any water. The roots of those native plants will. And when we have home gardeners using too many fertilizers and other pesticides, they actually use more than farmers. On our tiny little square lots, even in our backyard gardens, they buy a gallon of something, they don't read the directions, and they think they should use the whole gallon, and they should not. They should only use ounces. Sadly, that's the pesticide company's marketing and packaging to get you to just buy more. But that doesn't mean you should use the whole amount. So certainly, again, pollinator habitats can also be certified and award-winning. Like this one, this is my habitat, where the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden gave me this recognition of my habitat, because I am, as I said, feeding our little friends. So you can get this recognition. Many states have it, different state extensions or universities will have a certification that you can have for your pollinator habitat. Certainly there are guides. If you haven't looked at our 2 videos by Dave Riddell of OPN Seed of how to install a variety of sizes of pollinator habitats, I encourage you to go to our pay-per-view site and look at that. It's very instructive, but you can certainly find these other installation guides, whether it's from Xerces or Ernst Conservation Seeds, as well as the University or the Environmental Education Alliance of Georgia. So there are plenty of guides out there to help you plant your habitat. And always trying to figure out the plants you want to plant there. Many of those guides have lists. You can also go to this website. You can simply type in honeybee net. I'm not expecting anyone, unless you want to get out your phone, take a quick screenshot. But this one also, you just click on where you live based on the color section there of that map, and it will give you a list of forage plantings, whether it's flowers, trees, or shrubs that provide food and habitat for honeybees and native pollinators. Because in the end, our pesticide-free pollinator forage will give us all cleaner water. This is the watershed here in Ohio. There are some states, I think in Tennessee, they have 4 different watersheds because the state is so wide. In Ohio, we have a north-south watershed. One part goes to Lake Erie, the other to the Ohio River. So as our lawn chemicals run off, as any other pesticides run off tightly packed lawns, they are polluting the water, they're killing the water invertebrates, they're damaging the food supply for fish, and decreasing our tourism and recreation around water in all of our communities. So these are those talking points you can share with your neighbors, especially those who like fishing, that by having pollinator habitat, you are helping to provide cleaner water in your community. So let's start and see how I transformed my grassy lawn into pollinator habitat. As you can see, it's a typical city lot. Now, I do want to make the clarification from the get-go, I am not a gardener. I have all these seeds that I put in, but after a while I went, you know what, I'm going to go to the experts, give me a nice pollinator mix, I'll put it in. I struggle to identify sunflower seeds. So I don't know names of flowers. When people ask me, I'll go, well, that's the purple one, or that's the yellow and the brown one. I know my goldenrod because this past year, my goldenrod just took off. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about the Latin names of plants and anything else. I wanted to put in pollinator habitat. I wanted to spend more time with my bees and yet provide them that diverse food. So I looked at doing all of this and how I share it with others, as I am not a gardener. I felt that most people want to do it the way I did, which is the lazy way, as well as, okay, I've now run out of time. What do I do? So I'm going to take you through it. So certainly a couple of things you want to check in your own community. What are your city rules for the height of grasses and flowers? Typically flowers have no height restrictions, but grasses do, especially in cities. Most cities have ordinances that say grass cannot be taller than 8 inches. And it depends on where, sometimes in the tree lawn versus your yard. But typically even in your yard, they don't want it taller than 8 inches. But flowers, they can't control that height because it's going to be based on the sun and water and the nutrients in the soil of how tall your flowers get. Now, pesticide residues, if you've been treating your yard year after year, you may have to just truly let some of that pesticide burn off if it can. Do a soil test. Again, I would encourage you to go back to Dave Riddell's presentation or talk to your local extension agent to see if they can do a soil test and test for pesticide residues. Because you don't want to put in hundreds of dollars of pollinator seeds and then have them all die because of the half-life of pesticides that are still, especially an herbicide, that is just going to kill the seeds you plant. So certainly the biggest thing, and this is where people always fail, especially after I've done my presentation and I go back to a community a year later and people come up to me and say it failed and I did everything you said, and I said, yeah, but did you dig up your soil? And they always say yes. When I always tell them, as did Dave Riddell from OPNC, do not dig up your yard. Don't do it. Do not dig up your yard. I realize the garden industry has taught us, and all of the garden equipment people have made these wonderful machines that will till up the soil. Don't do that if you're planting pollinator habitat. All you're doing is bringing the weeds seed and the grass seed to the surface, and they're going to go, oh yay, sunshine, thanks. And that weed bank will just explode because you have dug it up and brought it to the soil. So do not till, because keep in mind with pollinator seeds, with wildflower seeds, Mother Nature does not plant the seeds 3 inches down and 6 inches apart. Mother Nature simply drops the seeds from a flower that is drying out. They drop the seeds on the ground, and the rain and the snow pulls that seed into the ground. Mother Nature's not putting things into the soil a few inches down and 6 feet apart or whatever. So do not dig up your yard. Do not till the soil. Don't do it. Don't do it, because it will fail. But you do need to kill the grass and the weeds so that there is a clean slate to cast your wildflower seeds, so that those wildflower seeds have a way to grow, to reach into the soil and then to reach toward the sun. So I'm going to talk about 3 pesticide-free methods, and then one that uses an herbicide, obviously. So solarization is how I did my yard. But there are certainly other ways. You can remove the sod. If you don't want to do a whole prairie-like effect across your whole yard, you could just start in beds and cut out the sod. And that's one way to get rid of that grass. You can also use fire, but not in a front yard in an urban area. Please do not do that, because the fire department will be very upset with you. So if you have acreage, if you live a bit out in the country, not far from a city, but you know it's not a huge farm field or something, talk to your local fire department, your township fire department, or your volunteer fire department, get their permission, and have maybe them do it as a practice run for in a sense, a brush fire. But hire professionals if you have the land mass, the acreage, to burn off the weeds and the plant life that is there in order to make a clean slate. Get professionals. Do not do it yourself. And for gosh sakes, don't do it in the city. Not with a gas line underneath. Don't do that. So, but those are the 3 ways without pesticides. The last one, if you use an herbicide, again, read the directions, how to use it. It's ounces, not gallons of the product, based on your square footage. So yes, you'll have to do some math on the square footage of your yard. Now, certainly there are organic herbicides you can use. This is one product that we used on a Boy Scout project that was in a national park, where the national park said you cannot use a chemical synthetic herbicide. So we used this product. Yes, it's a quote unquote burned down herbicide, but it is based on citrus oil. So we sprayed that on the ground. So again, it came from citrus. We did have to add a colorant to it so we could see where we were, because it came out, it was clear originally, but it worked quite well on the grasses that were there to dry them out so that the seeds could contact the soil and have a chance to take root. So certainly, again, we want to plant our habitat for the monarch butterflies to support their root. And, you know, glyphosate, people think it is safe. It isn't. And this is why, even as we plant, we have to be aware of where we're planting and what was used on the land. You can see glyphosate, that's the brown colors, and look where the monarchs are going. So this is why monarchs are struggling. We keep destroying milkweed. Sadly, we called it milkweed. Doug Talmy said if we had called it Monarch's Delight, people wouldn't be so angry at milkweed. So we need to look at this as that is the main plant monarchs need. And when we prep our habitat, look at the products we're using, because even with glyphosate, the bee research is there that shows it is problematic to bees, that it impairs their cognitive capacities, reduces their short-term memory, it makes them less sensitive to nectar reward, you know. So and then the glyphosate can be picked up on the feet and the body hairs of the bees, and they take it back to the nest and distribute it across the hive. So that synthetic herbicide, glyphosate, I try not to talk in brand names, but that's the most popular herbicide right now. So if you are forced to use some type of liquid or chemical treatment, go for an organic, truly natural herbicide to deal with prepping your land. So again, I use solarization, and many people keep thinking, oh, I'll just throw a blue tarp over it or put the kids' swimming pool cover over it. No. Yeah, UC Davis really talks about the best way to do the solarization. It's got to be transparent or clear plastic, as you see in this picture. Now I use a product called Visqueen, which is a construction grade plastic. So it's a fairly thick, and don't get tied up in how thick should it be and is this good. It's like, you know, you will know if it's going to be thick enough. You're not going to put saran wrap on your yard. It's got to be something that you can walk on it, a dog can walk on it, and they're not going to tear it, that it will hold through wind and rain. Because it can take, depending on where you live, 6 to 8 weeks to solarize your yard. What you're doing is creating a greenhouse effect. So you've got to tamp down this plastic. You can't have the edges still picking up in the wind. You've got to use lawn staples and put this down so that you're holding in the heat over the soil, over the yard. Now, if you want to use black plastic, that's fine, but it's not going to be as effective because it's deflecting some of that heat, and it's not as effective as the transparent or clear plastic because, again, you're cooking the grass is what you're doing in solarization. So you want to trap that heat in there and cook the grass. As my yard cooked, especially as spring came in, the plastic would poof up from the heat and then kind of go down again for, in the night. But you knew it was cooking. You knew the heat was building up under there. So for about 2 weeks, the grass really loved it. It could grow early in the spring, and then it went, okay, now it's too hot and you're killing me. And that was the goal, to kill the grass. So again, here's the difference that UC Davis, it's ipm.ucdavis.edu that talks about solarization. So feel free to check that out. But you just need a construction grade, clear, transparent plastic and some staples and patience. Lay this out across your yard. So again, there's my yard. I started this in 2014. You can see it was still snowing. I live in Northeast Ohio, just on the edge of the snow belt from Lake Erie. So there's still snow on the ground. It's a little postage stamp front yard. I've got a lilac. I don't know if my pointer will work. Yep, there's a lilac bush, which is turning into a tree. So again, I am not a gardener. Okay, I plant these things and go with God. So when I then started putting down the plastic, you can see there's still snow under there, and that's okay because it was going to heat up and melt and go into the yard. I did put down some like lawn fencing. I ended up putting just some small timbers over this because I thought, okay, the wind is going to pick this up. But all these little puckers you see right here are lawn staples, which, are what they seem to be. And they help to hold down the plastic because you want to trap that heat under there as best you can. So this was there's the rest of the yard all done. You can see I've got more lawn timbers to hold down the plastic, although I will say it never did get caught up by the wind. It stayed put. It stayed put. The wind never pulled it up. And again, it sat there for, well, from April through June, April to June. So there it is, all tucked in. And you can see here on the edges. Now this is a weak spot because the heat's still escaping there because I couldn't tuck it under my driveway or my neighbor's driveway. So, but it wasn't a lot of grass that was still able to grow there. It was very minimal. So there it is, all laid out. Now this side didn't get much sun. In retrospect, I never really cooked that grass enough, and it never gets enough sun because there's this huge oak tree back here. So I probably could have not solarized that at all, but I wanted to be efficient and give it a try. So after 6 weeks, so that was April 1st, I finished putting down the plastic. By June 6th, that's what the yard looked like. And you can see there was still some grass here on the edges, because I couldn't, again, tuck the plastic under the driveway. But all I had to do was get out my mower and cut down the dead grass, because the grass did continue to grow for a while. So in order for the pollinator seeds to contact the soil, I put the mower on the lowest cutting and cut that dead grass down to the nubbins. That is, I think, a designated level on the mower, nubbins. So then we've got June 6th, after cutting the grass and raking, I did also put in a walkway for my postal carrier. Do that. I mean, let's support our postal carriers. They bring us mail every day. If you need to on an urban lot and they're walking from yard to yard, put in a walkway for your mail carrier, because mine is used to doing this. So I didn't want them trampling my flowers, nor did I want to anger them. So I put in that walkway. And of course, after doing that walkway, I was a little tired. So here I am with the cleared yard, grass, dead grass mowed down to the nubbins, the little sidewalk is in, and the directions, of course, are lightly rake the yard, lightly rake. After putting in that little walkway, it was lightly raked. So I was tired. So, and it's just with, again, a yard rake, not a leaf rake, to try and scratch some edges in the soil, not till it, just scratch it a bit. So yeah, I did that. And then I simply took, in a sense, a plastic tub, like a Tupperware tub, mixed the seeds together with some sand, basic playground sand that you could get at a big box store. You mix it up so that you break up the seeds, the sand, or you can use some cat litter, not clumping litter, some cat litter just to be a medium to break up the seeds. And as you scatter it, it doesn't make the seeds then clump in one area. And I simply just used that and lightly spread the seeds, walked across the yard and spread the seeds. Now I didn't use a grass seed spreader because pollinator seeds, the mixes I had, the seeds are all different sizes. And again, the grass seed spreader was just going to fling things too far, so that wasn't going to work. This is a small yard. I just walked around and shook the seeds out. And then I did water them in. So because I have a slope to this yard, and typically the previous years, all the water would pool here. So after I'd have a heavy rain, I'd have a huge puddle here. So I didn't want all the seeds to suddenly just run down to the sidewalk. So I did water it in maybe 3 times in 10 days so that those seeds would stay put. And within 10 days, I had sprouting in 10 days. So again, you'll have those initial seeds, kind of a good pollinator mix has some fast growing seeds in it. So you do have some growth the first year. But typically that first year, those first year flowers don't come back after that. They are just there to help the other seeds, protect the other seeds, give you some color the first year, and then allow the perennials to go into the soil first so that they can grow down before they grow up. So that was June, and then we had by July, look at the flowering. Look at the flowering, I had lots of color. Who knew my flowers could get that tall? But they loved being there. My front yard gets full sun, so everything just kept blooming. While I initially tried to put shorter flowers over in one area and some different colors over here, yeah, everything moved. My flowers have moved every year. They will grow where they want to grow, and you can't force them otherwise. Even for about the first 4 years, I had one section, which was kind of an S-curve down from the lilac bush, that nothing would grow there. None of the flowers did, until finally some of the bee balm and the goldenrod said, well, this looks like a good spot. And then they started dropping their seeds, and then they came up there the next year. It finally filled that in. So here we have, even in October, in Northeast Ohio, I had flowers blooming my first year. And again, the only time I watered this was the first 10 days to make sure the seeds stayed put. You do not want to put straw over top of your seeds. Nobody's going to eat the seeds. The birds aren't going to come in and pick it clean. None of them did. They actually looked for grubs and worms, but they didn't bother with the seeds because they went, oh, we can get down to this yard. Yay. So, but as you can see, the flowers came up. So obviously nothing came in and ate all the seeds. So there we are, October 1st, that's my neighbor's view of the yard the first year. And boy, my yard's changed a lot in 8 years. So, but you can see the walkway, look at that, nice and clear for the mail carrier. And things are growing, going to seed all at the same time. Growing, blooming, and going to seed all at the same time. And that's what you want in order to also help control any weed growth. If you only plant spring blooming flowers, then you're going to have a heck of a time after those flowers are done blooming. The weeds are going to take over. So that even if you try and do beds, you don't do a prairie effect, you do beds, make sure you have seeds in each bed that are going to grow, bloom, and go to seed all at the same time, so that you have a constant blooming cycle, then one, a cycle where things are going to seed, but you've got flowers doing all those things all at the same time in order to keep out the weeds. So here we are after the first frost and the snowfall. I'm one of those gardener types who says I'm letting anything bloom until Mother Nature kills it off. So there we were, November 23rd in 2014, and the oak tree has dropped all of its leaves, as you can see. So my first year, I did what I probably shouldn't have done, but I did, you want to knock things down so that the seeds stay in your yard, but at the same time, you want to leave some of those seed heads for the birds to eat. So I mulched too much stuff. I went in there with my mulching mower and I ran over the stalks, the leaves, which while that provided some nutrients in the soil, I probably killed some native bees that had laid eggs in the plant stalks and who also might have laid eggs or were keeping warm under the leaf litter. So, and then by, taking away the seed heads, chopping those up, while many of those seeds went into the yard, I also took away a food source for the birds. So there are other ways, and you'll see it in some future pictures of how to deal with that. Certainly, it probably made my neighbors happy. Oh, look, it looks like a yard again. But again, that's not grass there. That is not grass. That is just the, cutting off the plants, the flowers that were growing there. Now, this first year, I did try to kill some of the grass that didn't get killed the first time. So I laid down newspapers and leaves on top of it. There are some people who think, okay, I'm just going to lay cardboard across my yard or newspapers and then plant that way. Yeah, but you've still left your weed bank. And the value of solarization is it truly cooks the grass seed roots, because you saw the picture, they're not that deep, so that it really helps to control that grass. So, depending on the cardboard and the newspaper, what are the chemicals that might be leaching into your soil from the cardboard or the newspaper? And again, I'm not sure how your community is going to feel about an entire yard laid out with cardboard. And then you've got to bring in a lot of soil to put on top of that cardboard, and then what's in that soil. So solarization really works well to kill that root system of the grass. So there we are, it's all ready for winter. And that was a nice winter. We had a really nice snowfall. Again, please shovel for your postal carrier, the walkway. They need to have safe paths when they deliver the mail. So, but all that snow then will melt into my yard, pulling those seeds down into the soil and providing that water to help those plants survive a dry summer. So there we are, May, and you can see the leaves have deteriorated. We do have some dandelions popping up, but I never had the dandelions taking over. It was always just kind of along the edge, but not a lot. Some newspaper did not degrade, but the leaves did. So I did rake those leaves off, and yes, the grass was, again, kept from sunshine, but it helped provide a clean slate for then the flowers, those seeds that did drop, to hopefully come up then in the spring. So there we are by May, the plants are starting to return, and it was a dry May. It was a really dry May. But you can see things are growing between this cracked soil. So once we had some rains in May, look at how those plants took off. And I always have some volunteer plants. We always have volunteer plants. The birds are great at planting things. I can't plant sunflowers at all. I don't know where the seeds go, but the birds are great at planting sunflowers. So there's my second year of the yard. And I typically go through different color palettes across the season. A lot of yellows and the whites in the spring, and then it goes into the purples and the oranges. And then I get more of the oranges, especially now with goldenrod, toward the end of the season. So there it is, year 3. Again, I had knocked down things so that I could reseed. I've only seeded the yard once when I bought the seeds. Then every year I knock things down so they reseed my yard, especially for those annuals, because I still have a lot of annuals in here. The perennials, they get seeded once, they grow down, then they start growing up, but they drop seeds. So you want to make sure to continue to refresh your yard. And then April 9th, look at that. I was afraid my yard was starting up so nicely, and then we had another snowfall. We always do in Northeast Ohio. We always have snow right before Easter, but native plants again did not bother my native plants at all. Look at things coming up through the leaf litter, blooming, and there we are, May 18th. Now I did have to start to put up a fence because my newspaper carrier and others just thought they could tromp right through this, and I got a little cranky when people stepped on my flowers. So I put up a fence to keep people from walking through there. And then there we are, year 3 in June, and you can see plants are coming up. Certainly the plants are growing where they want to. You can see I don't care if they grow in the cracks in the sidewalk. If they can grow there, I feel they should have a right to live. So that's just me. But it's a wonderful array of diverse floral nectar and pollen for all of the pollinators. There we are with the, there's my volunteer sunflower. Thank you, birds. But I believe those are brown-eyed Susans, I believe. And then we've got, I think the bee balm is there in the back. Then I often have a lot of seeds that, yes, the flowers will start to fall over and drop their seeds on the sidewalk. I, of course, sweep those up and throw them back in the yard because I don't want them running down the street. Although my seeds, I have noticed flowers all around. So you will help to, you and the birds will help to spread that pollinator habitat. So there we are, year 3 of October 2016. Now I originally started planting, it's got to be more than 20 years ago. I had planted my devil strip. Here in Northeast Ohio, we refer to the space between the sidewalk and the street as a devil strip. Some people call it a tree lawn. And here in Akron, we have been planting that for a number of like 2-3 decades. So I originally started out planting things in my devil strip. So of course, once I did my yard, these flowers spread to my devil strip. You can see all this nice echinacea here. I know my purple coneflower. So here we are, April of 2017. Again, things are coming back. My lilac really bloomed nicely that year, which certainly the carpenter bees love that. So carpenter bees with the shiny bum there. So then we have, in 2017, year 4, you can see that my goldenrod has taken off. Here's my goldenrod. I have a couple of varieties of goldenrod. This one's a fancy goldenrod. And then I did plant, because I'm a beekeeper, so I had planted a couple years previously some apple trees, and they finally started producing apples. So you can do a lot of things on your city lot. It's amazing. Now, I did remove the devil strip plantings in 2017 because I had a neighbor who was a master gardener, and he got a new neighbor. My master gardener neighbor had planted his devil strip soon after we did, so it had been there for at least 20 years, but his new neighbor complained about his. Now, in my community, our city is notorious for going to the wrong address to suddenly mow people's lawns because of some nuisance complaint. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take out my devil strip plantings, even though they'd been there for 20 years and I'd gotten Keep Akron Beautiful awards for them. Yeah, I thought I'd take them out. So you'll see the fancy goldenrod is still there. That's now in a pot. So I was able to dig up that, but I did remove my devil strip plantings because my neighbor had gotten a citation. So there it is in 2018. Oh, it just was starting to go crazy. Again, because the seeds kept dropping, the plants loved where they were growing. I did trim a limb on the lilac bush, which also expanded where those seeds could grow and those flowers could bloom. But then in 2019, I had a gas line replacement. So I'm of an age where usually the gas line replacement meant that they dug up your entire front yard. Now they don't do that. I was quite pleasantly surprised. They only dug up the devil strip, which I'd already removed plants from there, so yay me. And then they take this little tube and run it into the former gas pipe. So they didn't have to dig up the rest of my yard where those flags were. They just shove this tube through the pipe and make some new attachments in the house and out here, and there we go. So this was the gas line replacement. And so of course I was out there taking pictures because, you know, it's construction and there's always some poor guy standing in a hole in the ground. So my father was a contractor and I saw that a lot. So, because that's the nature of construction. But you can see that it was just at the devil strip where they did this. But they did dig this up a lot because it took them, they had to dig 2 holes to find the actual gas line. And even though I told the company, you do not have to come back and put down any soil. I don't want grass there. I don't want anything, because I knew any soil they would bring would have stuff in it. Well, they did it anyway. They still brought, and then the devil strip that I had cleared got really weedy the following year, or the rest of this year. But you can see all this dirt. So they stirred up the weed bank here. So that, of course, excited all the weeds. And then they came in 2 days later and dumped in some dirt, even though I told them not to. So they gave me weeds. Basically, they gave me weeds. So here we are in July then, a few months, so it was February of 2019, they did the gas line. So here's the yard in July, doing wonderfully, because thankfully they didn't have to cut through the entire yard. But the goldenrod in 2020, oh my gosh, did it take off. And it got so tall, as you can see. I was having to put rope out there to hold it back. The bees loved it. The place was a buzzing, I'll tell you. But the goldenrod really took off. So here it is in the fall of 2020. As you can see, everything has gone to seed. It's quite tall. So I did want to knock that down for the year, because also I had an ordinance nuisance complaint, which if you attend our November 7th talk, you'll find out how that went, which I still have my habitat, but it is good to learn how to deal with these things when they do come up. And interestingly, it wasn't because of the height of flowers. It was because of 2 flowers I had planted, which are typical in pollinator habitat mixes: goldenrod, well, then milkweed also, and daisies. All flowers pollinators need. And yet you have cities who call those noxious weeds. So that is what they couldn't get me on anything in my devil strip. I did have some weeds growing from the gas line thing, but I kept whacking those down. But it was the goldenrod, the daisies, and the milkweed that inspired the city. Actually, the neighbor who complained about my master gardener neighbor, who complained about my yard. So I did get this knocked down for the fall, also to help with the reseeding and to assuage the city. So thankfully, the city, who I've worked with them on a number of things, including spending 2 years on some urban ag ordinances with some coalition partners. So they kept delaying. In one sense, it was good it happened this year, because you couldn't have in-person meetings. They delayed the hearing for my nuisance complaint until October. So I was ready to knock things down by then. Anyway, things had gone to seed. So you can see the yard is all knocked down and it's reseeding. That goldenrod's going to come back next year. It's going to come back this summer. So I have to do things. Now, again, I talked about if you wanted to cut out the seed, you don't have to do a prairie effect. You could cut out the sod, I'm sorry. So you could cut out the sod. That's removing the grass, and plant your seeds. But again, make sure that you have a mix of plants, of seeds that will grow across the season, so that you don't want to just have a spring blooming bed, because once those spring blooms are done, the weeds will come in and go, hey, this is a nice place to grow. As long as you have something growing, blooming, and going to seed, a variety of plants across the growing season, you will be able to keep out the weeds. And you'll have beauty the whole time and food for the pollinators the whole season, and it'll be easy to care for. Now if you do have, I don't know that anybody has 30 acres, but if you do, and if you have that large of an expanse, really I encourage you to check out Dave Riddell's talks that he did for us on our pay-per-view site on preparing and planning for pollinator habitat on this larger scale. But this 30 acres, while herbicide was tried, you can see it did not make a clean slate. You have to get rid of the foliage that is there. So on a case like this, burning is the way to go, especially it was 30 acres. That's a clean slate so that you can lay down those seeds. And this is what it looked like the next summer. We're going to see if we can play. Oh, I don't think this, oh, that won't allow me. There we go. We're going to see if you can, there. It's the sounds of that habitat. And you can get some of these sounds in your own yard, in your little habitat. You don't have to have 30 acres. But those were our sounds from our childhood when we had lots of insects. And the birds. Oh, it's just such a vibrant habitat. And you can have that in your own front yard. If you have smaller acreage and maybe you don't want to do the solarization, maybe you choose to do the organic herbicide like this organization also did, and then they hydro-seeded. So they're mixing all these seeds with like a pulp mix, shredded paper in a pulp mix, and then they spray it across the area so that that pulp mix is that agent that helps hold the seeds down instead of the sand or something. And there you have the growth that next spring. So there are a variety of ways that you can do the planting, that you can install your own habitat on your own yard, whether you've got small acreage or not. I encourage you to not stress and strain over what to plant and each seed and only getting specific seeds. There are wonderful seed companies out there, OPN Seed, there's BBB Seed, that have these wonderful mixes. So, but make sure you're planting seeds for your area. That was one thing when I put in mine. I got some seeds from BBB Seeds, wonderful seeds, but some of them were for west of the Mississippi. So of course those didn't survive well here, but many of their others did. My OPN seed are seeds for east of the Mississippi, and that's where I am. But it was wonderful source mixes out there that are a wonderful mix, again, that it's you get things growing, blooming, and going to seed all at the same time. Now, if you want to see all the seeds that I planted, here's a variety of those plants. Again, I couldn't tell you which ones are which. So I can tell you certainly some of those, forget-me-nots and poppies, yes, cosmos. So it was a ton of seeds. Now, certainly not everything will always come up because it's going to depend on your soil nature. It's going to depend on the sun and the rain as to what will grow and come up. Some things may stay in the seed bank that do better in a really drier time period, and those will all pop up, and the other things that really deal well with a wet spring or summer, those will pop up. So don't expect every single thing to come up at once. You got to be flexible with Mother Nature. She will rule. She will tell you what will grow there, because what will grow there is what's going to be supported by the soil, and it's providing either way diverse food for your honeybees, for your native pollinators. You're going to reduce your mowing in spring, summer, and fall. You might just have the knockdown if you get a mulching mower to do that, or if you just pretty much take a weed whacker and chop it off at the base for the stems. Let those stems now sit there over the winter, so that in the native pollinators that lay their eggs in the stems of plants can emerge next year, and you have a wonderful new generation of native pollinators. So don't mulch everything in your yard, but you can knock the stems down just with a weed whacker, and that way they fall over into the yard, and the birds still have access to some of those seeds so that they can help to survive the winter as well. So that you're providing habitat for beneficial insects as well as birds. You're reducing your stormwater runoff. Again, you don't, with this type of habitat, you do not have to water it. Mother Nature takes care of herself. And you're regenerating your soil. Our front and backyards are from our basement. When your basement is dug out, the contractor just dumps the basement, gravel and clay and whatever else in your front and backyard and spreads it out. And after 60, 70 years, that's really hard packed. This is why your grass root system is like this big. So you will want to put in those native plants. We can make change 1 yard at a time by providing gardening for us, food for our native pollinators, who then turn around and pollinate our gardens. And we would finally get a lot from our lots. Again, I've got 2 apple trees on my yard, and while I didn't get a lot of apples, the first year I got 30 pounds of apples. And I still have a pie in the freezer. So it's a wonderful thing. You can expand your activities, teaching your kids about pollinators. You can take photographs of them. You can learn about all the different pollinators because they're all coming to your yard. You will be surprised at the diversity of insects. And even dragonflies will come there so that they will eat the mosquitoes in your neighborhood. My neighborhood has not sprayed for mosquitoes for at least 6, 7 years because they cannot find any standing water. My yard now absorbs all the water. The bees or the birds have helped to spread the goldenrod and things to a vacant lot that's rather wet, helping to absorb the water. So we haven't had to spray for mosquitoes in my neighborhood. But you can enjoy all of these wonderful, wonderful insects that we really need to help support, are vital to our ecosystem and provide us so much joy as well as food. So wow, I made it. I still have 10 minutes to go. So we're good. And hopefully Terry can unmute everybody, or if there are any questions in the chat section, that would be great. Certainly feel free to share this with, let your friends and family and other beekeepers or gardeners know about our Login to Learn webinars. You can find them on through our webpage and our pay-per-view partner, so that people can log in and listen to those webinars at their convenience. And Terry, if you want to unmute some folks and see, or check the chat section. I'm not sure.
Everyone's been asked to unmute themselves.
Okay. Or you can always, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you can put something in the chat room. I do not see the selection here for the chat room. Oh, maybe it's over there. Yeah, it is. Okay. So if you have a question, you can always email me later if you would like. My email address is there. Feel free to contact me about seeds, about the process of the solarization, and most importantly, do not dig up your yard. Do not dig up your yard, okay? So I can't stress that one enough. So hopefully this was instructive for folks to give you some ideas about how you can plant habitat in your own yard, because certainly when Dave Riddell at OPN Seed talked about habitat, his was a little more on the large scale, but he did talk about some smaller ways you can do that. But you're going to have to educate family and friends and convince them that a grassy yard is just a waste of money. It's polluting. Grass does not hold on to water, and all the lawn chemicals are polluting our rivers and streams. So we need the beauty of our pollinators. We need the insect control of our pollinators. Ooh, is there a question in the chat? I think there is. Let me see. Oh, well, thank you, Randy. Hopefully that was instructive for you and inspiring that you can do it too. Again, I'm on my 8th year. I do not expect, even though I had a nuisance complaint last year, I do not expect them to have any problems this year, because I'm going to spend some time educating them, the policymakers, and have daisies, milkweed, and what was the other thing? Daisies, milkweed, and goldenrod removed from the noxious weed ordinance, because it's outdated, scientific, and it certainly is not kind of the way of the world and what we know now, that we need those plants for pollinators. And our pollinators are so valuable to us. We have got to restore the ecosystem of the insect world so that we have a healthy community and a healthy environment. So you can find us on Facebook, on Instagram. Certainly for those of you in the Habitat series, we'll be back April 7th to go through the noxious weed ordinances and how you can find out if you have them in your community, how I resolved the issue that I had, and learn also, we have a guest speaker with us as well, Charlotte Ecker-Wiggins, who's going to talk about her perspective as a former city council person. Who was also a beekeeper, and how she dealt with the noxious weed ordinance in her community as a council person. So if we don't have any more questions, thank you very much for hanging in there, seeing the whole 8 years of my habitat. I hope it was inspirational for you and you enjoyed the photographs. And thank you very much. And everyone, we'll see you on the 7th of April. Thank you very much then.